A Singaporean cargo ship in the strait was attacked by Iran. So what's the situation in the strait now? Has shipping been suspended? And what's the latest on the negotiations between the US and Iran? This morning, President Trump made a serious statement on Truth Social, saying that the Communist Party has infiltrated the United States. I've been preparing for decades. Everyone, just watch what happens. So what exactly is President Trump referring to? All right, and another piece of breaking news, which I haven't had a chance to fully integrate yet, is about Beijing's China World Trade Center, also known as Beijing's Zuego Tower. It was hit by a light aircraft. So what's going on here? There are already a lot of rumors online saying this is Beijing's 9/11. All right, here's a quick update on this topic for everyone. Welcome to Good Morning America, brought to you by Feng Wen. Hello to all our YouTube viewers, and greetings to all our listeners on Silicon Valley FM 96.1. Now, let's get straight to the point. So, what about Iran? Yesterday, they hit a commercial ship called the New Singapore. This ship was traveling along the Oman section of the Strait of Hormuz, hugging the Omani coastline. So the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's drone actually flew across the strait and directly struck the bridge of his cargo ship, causing significant damage to the vessel. The UN's International Maritime Organization called for a halt to ship traffic, telling everyone to stop. But the US is still encouraging ships to pass through. 8 ships went through today and over 30 yesterday. Meanwhile, the latest news is that 3 giant cruise ships, after being threatened by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, had no choice but to turn back and retreat from the strait into the Persian Gulf. And what about American fighter jets? Right now, they're taking off frequently in the Persian Gulf. This is basically a show of strength. Last night, when President Trump was having dinner with American agricultural representatives in the White House Rose Garden, he said, "We have dealt a heavy blow to Iran. Right now, we are negotiating from a position of absolute advantage, and they are very eager to reach an agreement with us." At the same time, President Trump insisted that Tehran must not be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons. The president also said that the Strait of Hormuz will remain open. He also reiterated that Iran could become a new market for American farmers. He said the government would use Iranian funds to purchase American soybeans, wheat, and corn. Right now, Iran is facing a food shortage. However, Iran's Speaker of Parliament, Ghalibaf, posted on X saying, "The only crop we have harvested is the distrust you have sown." Basically, he's saying he doesn't acknowledge it, that there's no such thing. So right now, Iran is indeed facing negotiations, and it's a very, very tough negotiation. You could put it this way. Next is Feng Wei's commentary. This is a situation where President Trump has to deal with a rogue regime abroad, while at home he faces fierce opposition from the domestic opposition party and even differing opinions within his own ruling party. So yesterday I told everyone that there was a big argument in Congress, but in the end it was settled. This shows the internal disagreements within the ruling party, but in a sense it was finally resolved. What happened yesterday, specifically on Tuesday, was that the Senate, which is controlled by the Republican Party, passed a resolution regarding President Trump's war powers on Iran. Then last night, actually the night before last, it was reversed. So, of course, let me say again, this is a resolution, not a bill. It's just a statement of position. Anyway, balancing both internal and external factors is really difficult to begin with. Secondly, when it comes to a regime like Iran's, it's both overbearing and greedy. So how can the US negotiators strike the right balance? They can't be too tough, but they can't be too lenient either. So how can you keep just the right amount of pressure to lead Iran, this beast that's both overbearing and greedy, through the current delicate situation? There are a lot of issues involved here. Let me sum up the 7 main problems. So the first one is the strait issue. There are 2 parts to this. One is opening up the strait so ships can pass through, and the second is the issue of fees. So that's 2 already. Next is the issue of nuclear weapons, without a doubt. Then there's the question of how to use the unfrozen funds. Another issue is Iran's large-scale reconstruction of its ballistic missiles. And then there's Iran's funding of proxy armed groups throughout the Middle East. Another issue is the reconstruction funds, how to use those $300 billion if they're given. These are the 7 major challenges. All of these need to be resolved within the next 60 days. So honestly, it's really very challenging. Meanwhile, Iran and Oman have started holding meetings again, conspiring to control the management rights of the strait. In plain terms, figuring out how to collect tolls. At the same time, the Israeli Defense Forces are continuing their strikes. This is about Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, but they haven't launched large-scale attacks. So basically, it's impossible to achieve a complete ceasefire in Lebanon, but what can be achieved is the large-scale ceasefire. That's what Vice President Vance also said. He said they'll always keep fighting, but it should be small scale. Being able to stop large-scale conflict is already quite an achievement. So whether these negotiations over the strait can actually succeed is really a big question mark. I think there is some possibility of success, but no one can guarantee it. In the end, it's still possible that both sides could end up fighting. So, what do y'all think? Are you optimistic? Given the current situation, it's really tough. So, if these negotiations can actually succeed in the end, like I've always said, if they can succeed, if both sides can, what's the word, lay down their arms, that would be a really good thing for the United States. First, the midterm elections wouldn't be disrupted, and the development of the U.S. economy wouldn't be affected, while time is not on Iran's side. In the long run, the United States will only get stronger, and Iran will only continue to decline. Also, the Middle East is constantly developing new oil export pipelines that bypass the Strait of Hormuz. They'll speed up the process. So actually, Iran's ability to choke others is really just this brief moment. It's a lot like when the Chinese Communist Party tried to choke the West by restricting rare earth minerals. When they did that, a lot of defense contractors in the US, Europe, and Japan basically couldn't breathe. So what do you do in a situation like that? In the end, negotiations actually succeeded, didn't they? And time wasn't really on the CCP's side, because as soon as the negotiations succeeded and the CCP started releasing rare earth products again, the West was already racing to solve the problem on their own. It's actually a lot like Iran. If you wait another 3 to 5 years, the CCP won't be able to blackmail anyone anymore. In the same way, 3 to 5 years from now, Iran won't be able to use the Strait of Hormuz to blackmail anyone either. That's just how it is. So at that time, Trump was able to negotiate and get the CCP to make concessions on rare earth exports. They were able to finally accept the terms and put an end to the conflict. When I say conflict, I don't mean war. I mean they were able to reach a trade agreement and stop the dispute. Honestly, I think that was a really difficult thing to achieve, but it actually got done. Let's see if it can be done this time. The regimes involved are all like monsters, So let's just wait and see. Everyone, let's make an estimate, okay? Not a vote, just a guess, because no one can say for sure. Let's see what our viewers think. Do you think these negotiations will succeed in the end? If they do, that means the talks worked out, and things will end peacefully for now, and any future issues can be dealt with later. That's what I mean by a successful negotiation. So, do you think it will work out or not? Please share your thoughts with me, okay? I'm also really curious to know what our whole audience thinks about this, what your opinions are. Now, let's take a look at today's topic. Trump said, "The Communist Party is coming. Everyone open your eyes wide." What's going on here? Of course, this whole thing is definitely about Tuesday's primary in New York. In the New York primary, you could say the DSA had a big win. What is DSA? It stands for Democratic Socialists of America. It means social democratic or social democracy, socialist, democratic, socialist. They don't call themselves a party. Why? Because they're embedded within the Democratic Party. So this big win really points to some major issues. There are two significant trends, which I already talked about with everyone yesterday. The first trend is that it will spread from New York to major cities across the country. Okay, they're taking advantage of the emotions of young people in big cities, making them promises, giving them guarantees, and winning their votes. You could say that New York has pretty much fallen to the DSA. Another trend is from the grassroots to, well, the leadership level. What does that mean? From AOC to Jamal Bowman, if you still think this is just an act, a fluke, or an exception, that's no longer the case now. 3 members of Congress from New York are going to become what you might call the radical faction. Some viewers suggested I change the term from indulgent faction to radical faction. All right, let's go with radical faction. When it becomes a radical faction, it's already starting to take shape. And the key point is that people like Bernie Sanders, AOC, and Jamal Bowman, their positions and influence within the Democratic Party are rising rapidly and will continue to rise quickly. I don't think I'm wrong in saying this. Everyone will see this happen. So here are some of my comments. In 1958, Professor Skousen published a book called The Naked Communist. After it was published, it helped educate the American people about what communism really is. After it came out, it became one of the best-selling books. Then, within 4 years, it was reprinted 800 times. Well, reprinted 8 times. In the 1962 edition, a new section was added, about a page long, called The 45 Goals of the American Communist Party. Now, as of today, out of these 45 goals, 44 have already been achieved. One of them is to take over one or both of the major political parties in the United States, and that's exactly what's happening right before our eyes right now. Y'all know about the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. Their relationship with the Democratic Party is interesting. Why don't they run as their own party? Why do they have to join the Democratic Party? It's because they know they can't make it on their own. This is just like what happened in the 1920s. The Chinese Communist Party infiltrated the Kuomintang, basically parasizing it from within, growing by using the resources of that party. Of course, in the end, by 1927, the Kuomintang was fortunate to have Mr. Chiang Kai-shek. It was only because Chiang Kai-shek decisively purged the party that the Kuomintang didn't collapse within a few years. But in today's US, the Democratic Party doesn't have anyone with the authority, courage, or awareness to carry out such a purge. So now it's just blatant. What does democratic socialist mean? Let me explain. A democratic socialist is simply a socialist within the Democratic Party. To put it even more bluntly, it's just another label for the American Communist Party. So they blatantly parasitize within the Democratic Party, and no one in the Democratic Party dares to purge them. This is history repeating itself, just playing out all over again. That's all he's saying. The outcome will be different this time. All right, so President Trump last night tweeted, let me read it out. He said, "The communists have finally started to take action. I have been waiting and preparing for this for a long time." It's easy to be a communist. You just have to say, I'll give you everything. But what that really means is that you have to take it from those who worked hard for it themselves. Take away the property from those who earned it through their own hard work. For thousands of years, this kind of ideology has never succeeded, even once. All right, the game or this war has begun, so enjoy watching. Everyone keep your eyes on it. As for how to interpret this statement from Trump, I'll talk about that in a bit. Let me first mention another video Trump posted. He shared it as a truth, not a tweet, but a Truth Social post, which included a video and a summary sentence. The video is of President Kennedy's speech delivered 3 months after he became President of the United States on April 27, 1961. President Kennedy gave the speech to the American Newspaper Publishers Association at the time. What did he say? The general idea was this. The host asked him, "Sir, may I ask, how serious of a threat do you think communist subversive activities within the United States pose to our national security today?" President Kennedy replied, "I believe this is a serious issue, and we must be extremely cautious and take it very seriously. We need to support the laws that the United States has already enacted to deal with those who try to destroy us from within." Okay, he said we must support the efforts of the Department of Justice and the FBI and always remain vigilant. Kennedy believed that as long as America maintains a strong society at home, this is very important, everyone. Listen to me. I'll read it again. As long as America maintains a strong society at home, we will be able to handle any internal threats. So at that time, the threat the United States faced, or rather the threat President Kennedy faced, was an external one, subversion from Soviet communism. President Kennedy said that they relied on secret methods to expand their influence. They depended on infiltration, not invasion. They relied on subversion, not elections, on intimidation, not free choice. They used guerrilla fighters who operated at night, not regular armies in the daytime. He said this was a tightly organized and highly efficient machine. This machine combined military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political actions. What he was talking about was the entire Soviet and Eastern Bloc system. President Kennedy said that if we are to confront this kind of attack, as well as open invasion, national security requires certain necessary restrictions. What he meant was that we can't be as free as we were before. We have to defend ourselves, and we must impose some limitations. So in this video, what is shown above is the person who posted this video wrote a sentence as a summary. The summary goes like this. If communism in America is not stopped, it will destroy this country from within. This is their plan. Trump reposted the sentence. Okay, so let me break this down. Regarding this Kennedy video and Trump's repost, I have 3 points, 3 things to highlight that I can explain. First, this is President Kennedy we're talking about. Who is President Kennedy? He was a classic Democratic standard-bearer president. This is a Democratic president giving a speech about communist infiltration in America. But today's Democratic Party has already been infiltrated by Democratic socialists, or as I just said, socialists within the Democratic Party, or even American communists. To put it bluntly, they've completely taken over from the inside, like a cuckoo laying its eggs in another bird's nest. So actually, the DSA has openly said that joining the Democratic Party is not their ultimate goal. Obviously, we all know that, right? Just like when the communists infiltrated the Kuomintang back in the day, their goal wasn't just to get in, it was to eventually turn the Kuomintang into the Communist Party. That's exactly what the DSA is trying to do now. So what about today's Democratic Party? It's already gradually being led by people like Bernie Sanders, AOC, and Mamdani. And Kennedy's nephew, Little Kennedy, is now serving as a cabinet member under Republican President Trump. Doesn't that feel pretty ironic? So when Kennedy says these things, it really carries, how should I put it, a lot of authority. Or you could say it really proves the point. That's the first highlight. The second highlight, who was sitting in the audience during that speech back then? It was the American Newspaper Publishers Association. So at that time, this was the group in the US that President Kennedy could rely on for support. Today, these people have already become the opposition. The so-called mainstream media in the US has turned into left-leaning media, so President Trump can no longer gather the American Newspaper or Media Publishers Association and speak to them, expecting them to nod in agreement. They would cooperate with the President of the United States to defend America. But today, because the communists have already infiltrated Hollywood's so-called journalism schools, as well as the American media, and have also infiltrated many of America's teachers' unions, all of these have now become problems that the United States has to face. So third, back then, the biggest threat was what you'd call an external threat. But today, well, President Kennedy already said that if we are strong and healthy on the inside, then there's no problem. But today, it's exactly the internal problems that are happening. So this really proves that saying, if communism in America isn't stopped, they'll destroy this country from within, right? Just look at one election. New York has almost, if not completely fallen. At least half of it has been lost. So in New York City, it's because young people are struggling in life. And then they end up choosing socialism or socialist candidates. This is a very dangerous sign. So now, from AOC to Jamal Bowman to 3 members of Congress, it's basically like this DSA, the Democratic Socialists, are starting to take full control in New York. And then from 3 cities, Chicago, Boston, and Seattle, now to the biggest city in the US, New York. From here, it's very likely that this will spread to cities all across America. Multiple cities, but I can't say all cities, just some of them. The next one is Los Angeles, the second largest city in the US. So, as they say, important things should be repeated 3 times. Let me say it again. The sentence Trump retweeted, if communism in America is not stopped, it will destroy this country from within. All right, back to President Trump's earlier tweet. He said, let me read it again, communism is starting to take action. I have been waiting and preparing for this for a long time. With communism, it's easy. You just have to say, we'll give you everything. These words, this ideology has never succeeded once in thousands of years. So how should we understand what President Trump is saying here? I also have 3 points to look at. The first is, Trump knows that the Communist Party will definitely make a comeback. He ran for president precisely because of this. Of course, he didn't say it like this before, but now that he's saying it today, the meaning is very clear. Second, Trump understands what the Communist Party is all about, and he also knows how the Communist Party wins, right? Young people in New York feel that rent is too high, public transportation is too expensive, and childcare is too costly. So what did Mamdani say to them? He said, I'll freeze the rent, I'll give you free public transportation, I'll give you free childcare. That's how he got the votes. Has he delivered on any of that today? He hasn't done anything at all. But he already got the votes. So this is exactly how the Communist Party comes to power, by lying, by making promises, just like President Trump just said. You see how easy it is for the Communist Party? All they have to do is say, I'll give you everything. But how are they going to give it? Everyone knows. There's a saying among the communists that's pretty profound. Communist Party members, first, don't engage in production, and second, don't engage in invention or creation. They don't do any real work. Communist Party officials spend every day scheming and fighting, but they don't make any real contribution to society. The only way they can give people things is by taking from others and handing it out, right? That's the true nature of the Communist Party. So Trump understands very well that a Communist Party like this, with this kind of ideology, will eventually show its true colors, and in the end, it'll collapse into utter chaos. Now, the third point, the third highlight, is what Trump said. The game has begun, just watch. That is, the United States is now facing the rise of communism internally. It's a kind of war. Of course, this war doesn't involve weapons, and there's no smoke or gunfire. At least, it doesn't look like there will be any smoke. Why won't there be any? I'll explain in a moment. At the very beginning, there was a bit of smoke, but it was quickly and strictly extinguished. So I'll talk about what happened in Texas in a bit. This is a cultural war, a war of ideas, a war of ideology. But how many people in America can really understand this? I'm saying all this, but I know that Chinese people who came from mainland China can all understand what I mean. So let me say it to everyone once again. Please, everyone, buy this set of books. This set is basically the updated version of the 1958 communist book. First, it's a book about understanding communism written by Americans. Second, after it was localized into Chinese, we put a lot of effort into making it truly fit the Chinese context. It fills in the history of communism from 1958 to today, so really, every Chinese family and their children should read it. If you buy it and put it on your bookshelf at home, your child might just pick it up and flip through it. Who knows? Maybe they'll really get into it. That's actually how I read a lot of books when I was a kid. My dad put a lot of books on the bookshelf, and when I had nothing to do, I just sit on the floor under the bookshelf and flip through those books. That's how I read a lot of them. So I think this is a book that every family should have, and it should be placed where your kids can see it. So now, we need to help President Trump stop the rise of communism in America. That's why Chinese people are actually so important, because the group in America that has experienced communism the most is Chinese people from mainland China, the first generation Chinese immigrants. All right, now the next thing we're facing, the first major battle for President Trump, right? And that includes a major battle to push back against communism, the midterm elections. So the Iran policy, President Trump's Iran policy, is related to this, and it's also connected to the current Senate's so-called Save America Act, because this concerns the reliability of the election itself. So how about this Save America Act? Basically, 75% to 80% of people, according to different polls, support requiring ID to vote. And when I say people, I mean the entire population, not just Republicans. So this Save America Act absolutely should pass. But right now, it looks like it won't pass, and there are only 3.5 months left. This is the final stretch. So now what we're facing is a big challenge for the Save America court. And just recently, actually not just recently, but just 2 hours ago, Trump posted another tweet. The tweet was about a US congressman named Byron Donalds from Florida. He just posted this tweet, strongly criticizing the US Senate for failing to pass the Save America Act. He said that now they're going on recess until July 13th, and he finds this completely unacceptable. He said, "The Senate is terrible. Right now, I just want to shout out about this." He said, if Bernie Sanders wants to speak on the Senate floor, if he wants to occupy the floor for 6 months, then let him talk. Let him talk for 6 months and show how wrong his views are. That's exactly what the American people want to see. Trump then retweeted this to everyone. So now, President Trump is blocking the Senate. You could almost say he's holding up all the bills, including the housing bill. The housing bill I talked about yesterday is actually something Trump himself wants, not something the Democrats are pushing for. It's something Trump himself wants to solve America's problems. He wants to solve America's housing and livelihood issues. In the end, his own party passed it, but he's the one holding it up. Why? Because the Save America Act is his #1 priority. He said, you have to pass this before I'll sign anything else. So what about Wednesday? Trump went to Congress, right? He went to talk to those people. I talked about this process with everyone yesterday. As a result, he spoke very harshly to the Republican senators right there on the spot. All the senators were present. Right there, Trump spoke to them in strong terms. Exactly what he said wasn't recorded, so I don't know the details. Later, the media called out some of the senators to ask them about it. What did President Trump say? Well, the senator who was interviewed said that Trump spoke very forcefully and that he couldn't have said it any better himself. So this Save America Act absolutely has to be pushed through, no matter if it's by using standing or a filibuster. Whether it's through a real filibuster, just talking and talking until everything's been said, or by getting rid of the filibuster altogether, President Trump said, this is your business, you guys handle it. So he spoke very strongly. When asked if it would be effective, he said, I think if this doesn't work, then nothing will. Anyway, that's the situation. So moving forward in the next 2+ months, well, actually, you can't really say 3.5 months because in 3.5 months, the election will already have happened. Yeah, so it's really just a little over 2 months. That means Trump is determined to push through this hurdle, and we'll see how he manages to get past it. If you look at Trump's tweets every day, you can really tell how much he cares about this issue. Requiring an ID to vote? Honestly, it's kind of ridiculous that this is even something to fight over. Isn't it just common sense? How can you not check IDs? Does this argument hold up? It's bizarre, but it's working. Now, for other election news regarding reliability, the pillow guy. He's always trying to clear his name and expose the shady stuff. Passed away peacefully. Okay, that's a bit of a clickbait headline. Let me explain exactly what's going on here. So, what's the story? It's about Michael Lindell, the famous pillow guy, because his company makes pillows, right? Well, he's been targeted by this company called Dominion. So, this Dominion voting systems company is the one suing him. Dominion is currently the most widely used voting machine company in the United States, and in the 2024 election, their machines are still being used in 27 states. Even though it was at the center of major controversy in 2020, 4 years later, more than half of the United States is still using its machines. As we all know, after 2020, when it became embroiled in serious controversy, in the end, the courts didn't support any of the lawsuits, right? Not a single one of the cases questioning the reliability of the election was upheld. So what was the reason? I'll talk about that in a bit. So Dominion fought back, and in January 2021, they sued Attorney Powell for $1.3 billion. In the same month, they also sued Giuliani, the former mayor, seeking $1.3 billion in damages. The following month, they sued Michael Lindell, that's the MyPillow guy, and his company, also for $1.3 billion. Then in March, they sued Fox News, seeking $1.6 billion in damages. After that, they went on to sue Newsmax, One America News, and other right-wing media outlets, all for astronomical sums. Then, on April 18, 2023, they reached a settlement with Fox News, and Fox paid them $790 million.